Luxcana from Luxury Gaming, and I'm here with
Edmond Chiu.
Hello. How did you do today?
Well, I got first at the Fort Worth Lorcana Challenge.
Woo! Congratulations. So
you,
happy for you. What deck did we play?
So we played Ruby Amethyst today. Like my tried and true deck that I've been playing since like set 1.
That's awesome. Can we see it? Let's.
Sure. Okay, so first we have 4 Trinibux followers, and I think it also, with the 4 magic brooms, I think a lot of people are off the magic brooms because, they're like, oh, this is not useful, it has 1 attack, doesn't block the Flynn. But I think it adds a lot of consistency to the deck, especially in the mirror, where if you're able to open a 1-drop Flynn Sisu, you just basically win automatically. And also, if you don't draw Flynn, you can also bounce it back with Snake. And sometimes you can even deploy multiple 1-drops in certain matchups that can't really deal with a flood of characters. So I thought that was a main differentiator between my build and everybody else's Luca George style 16 uninkables for 1-drop style build.
Awesome.
Yeah. And next, 4 snakes. I don't think anybody cut any of these. These are very standard. The best part of Amethyst, I think, is being able to reuse the cards based on what you need them for specifically. And snakes were definitely very important. I would definitely not cut this card. So in Chicago, I actually didn't run Flynn, and I ended up 20th there, and I eventually lost to Blue Steel. And then I realized that I just didn't have enough pressure against them, so I cut the Cuscos and I put the Flynn Riders back in. And yeah, sometimes just being able to open a good hand and your opponent not being able to respond to it is enough to just win the game automatically.
So now question, do you find that the Flynn Rider is only good in the early game and not in the late game? Or do you more ink him in the late game, play him in the early game type thing?
It depends on the matchup, but let's say, for example, against Ruby Amethyst, I think past 4 ink, it's mostly just ink because they can just kill with a Brawl or a Medusa. Medusa's pretty bad because they get to deploy a character and you lose your character.
Yeah.
So these are probably the perfect inked late game. But in the beginning, it's very high pressure, right? You can play a Flynn. I've won some games where I just play Flynn on 2, a Sisu on 3, and then double Flynn on turn 4. And it's in the mirror, it's basically you just die immediately.
Yeah, it's what are you gonna pick?
Exactly. Yeah, you just die immediately. So. I like the card. I was off of it for a bit, and I realized the power after I added the 1-drops back in, because it just added more consistency to the deck. I thought before the deck was a little you miss your 1-2 some amount of the time, and I wasn't comfortable with that. So, but definitely I had to make some choices that to cut some of the uninkables to add those 1-drops back into the deck. We can go over later. Yeah.
Can't wait.
So definitely Flynn. Maleficent, I know some people cut a copy of this, but I think in terms of consistency, this is the best consistent card in the game. And I guess later it's this and Sisu, and one of the I think the best plays in the deck is Flynn and then Sisu, and then after you go Rabbit, you can either play another Maleficent to keep your hand healthy, or mostly to do that, or you can do it the reverse way. You can do Flynn or Snake, Maleficent. So you see how there's a lot of different combinations.
I was actually going to ask you, so if you have a Sisu and a Maleficent in your hand, which one are you playing turn 3?
Okay, that's a good question. If you have Flynn, I think it's more Sisu favored because you get the free win. If you're Snake, depending on the matchup, if it's a resource-based game, I like playing Maleficent.
Okay.
And sometimes when you need the board pressure, you would play Sisu.
She does quest for the 2.
For the 2. But you don't get the next card, right? So I think the power of Maleficent is that it gets you 1 card deeper into your deck that potentially is the card you need, right? That 1 card might have been that Rabbit that gets you chained to the next card to the next card. It could have been a friend to the next card to the next card. So I think a lot of people undervalue that aspect in terms of getting you to the next card that could potentially get you to the one after that. So I think in terms of Maleficent play, I like to play 1 on 3 or 5, and then Sisu on 3 or 5. So that's usually the kind of play pattern. The best is Flynn, Sisu, and a Rabbit, and then you play these replenishment cards Snake back your Rabbit, draw a card, play Maleficent, draw a card. Because if you play too many cards that don't replace themselves, your hand's gonna be empty, and then like you'll probably lose.
Yeah, because I was also wondering, like, by that turn, like, with the Flynn and the Maleficent, with the grab your swords, you're kind of losing both of those cards. So that's why I thought maybe the Sisu turn 3 would be more accurate.
Oh yeah, against specifically that, I would definitely play Sisu.
Okay.
Right? But against like Ruby, Amethyst, Mirrors, like if you had both, it's probably still Sisu. But sometimes this is like kind of like a backup.
Gotcha.
Kind of card, but it's still very good. I would say I don't feel comfortable cutting them. Fox, similar to Snake, does all the reusing aspects. I love, like, if you watch like my finals, like I love just like playing Rabbit and bouncing them back. It gets you to the next card. Still adds some pressure to the board. You still get a body. A 4/3 has Rush, very powerful. Can't cut it. Yeah. And then Sisu. Actually, I didn't play Sisu either in Chicago because I think they actually do come in a pair, like Flynn and Sisu. So you kind of have two kind of angles. Like you can either play like a more control style deck with like Cusco's and just more of the ladies. That's what I did in Chicago. Or you can play a more like aggressive strategy with like Flynn, Sisu, and then like a goat or a castle or a rabbit. Like there's a lot of like different combinations that you can have, right?
Yeah.
These gave you a lot of like free wins. And another reason why I wanted to run this was actually because of the big Sisu, right? So I didn't, if there wasn't big Sisu, I might have not ran this, but it was kind of like a nice bonus, I would say.
Because you get the shift into her.
You get the shift. So I think my favorite play in the deck is like, turn 5 you play a Sisu, and then turn 6 you can shift. Turn 7 you can actually like quest with the Sisu, and a lot of decks actually can't deal with like a turn 6 unexerted Sisu, especially like in the mirror. And you can actually like bounce the whole thing back with like a snake or a fox, and then replay the Sisu again or a castle.
Because you're getting the ink that you need.
Yeah, so you can use this as ink. It's very versatile because you get to pick up both of the Sisus, right?
Yeah.
And then now you have this threat that like they know about, but it's like, well, then you don't get to play like 2-cost characters for the rest of the game, right? So it's I would say it's extremely threatening, and I've definitely got some spots where against like green style decks, I shift on 6, they don't kill it, and then I bounce it back, and then I just sit on it, and then as soon as they deploy like a Diablo or like Prince John, Bucky style cards, you can just replay it. So it's like double be prepared type, a bounceable be prepared, which is extremely powerful.
Awesome.
Brawl, very important card. I said at the beginning of step 4, this is probably the most like important card for Ruby Amethyst, because the problem before was in set 3 there was a lot of like surfer style kind of like fights, and there was like no interaction. And now Brawl basically gives you this kind of smoothening to like the top end of your curve. So I think this card is extremely important. It kills Diablo, obviously. That's really why it's here. It kills Hirams. Those are the two like main culprits that you need to deal with immediately, or else they just run away with the game.
And the mirror match, Flynn.
I think here I kind of like to sit on, well, this deck specifically, I like to have their Flynn sit there, and then you can like try to big Sisu it, right? So in the mirror, this is mostly ink, to be honest. I know some people like brawling like rabbits, but I feel like that's so like negative tempo and also like negative card advantage. So I try my best not to do it unless I like absolutely must, right? But there's like a lot of consistency in the deck to be able to block Flynn. So I never had to actually brawl a Flynn in that kind of scenario. Mostly for Diablo and Hero. Friends, obviously, there's like, I think it's like the best card in the game, right? You draw 2 cards. It's like, Yu-Gi-Oh! Pot of Greed, draw 2 cards.
Exactly.
Right? And there's definitely some chains of like friends into more friends into more friends, like how we were talking about earlier with the Maleficent. It's like there's some sequences where it's like you have 2 things I can sing, you sing both things with friends, and then you draw into be prepared, then you be prepared, and that's like usually you just end the game right then and there. So yeah, can't cut friends. Rabbit is probably the only reason. I think this is actually the other half of the reason why you play Amethyst, right? Being able to like draw cards. This is like probably the best purple card or Amethyst card. Best card in Amethyst, right? Like I think most decks are basically how do I abuse this as much as possible. So obviously you have the fox, the snake, and just like just playing it is a huge threat and it's extremely annoying. And anytime they kill it, it's kind of like -1 kind of card for them.
Yeah.
So
because it's a 3, so it doesn't easily.
Yeah, it's not very easy to kill. So yeah, this card, I mean, obviously is very amazing, right? Goat. There was actually some period of time I was considering cutting Goat for like a Maleficent Dragon style deck to be more control oriented. But I realized that there's some games where you just instantly win if you're able to like play a goat and protect it and quest with it. So yeah, I didn't feel comfortable cutting goat because eventually you need some way to win, right? And goat is like the perfect card to do that. And yeah.
So can I ask you a question? So what's your ideal ink count? Because I know you mentioned the Maleficent Dragon. And I know sometimes with, like, let's say green steel, you might have trouble getting the ink count. So what is our ideal ink count that we want to shoot for that we feel comfortable playing with Ruby?
So in this deck specifically, I think 8 is the sweet spot because of the big Sisu being able to like top deck and you can play it, right?
Okay.
And if you didn't play the Sisus, I think 7 is like pretty comfortable. But it's because like on 7 you can ink to 8 and then play like double 4. So you see a lot of the power cards in this deck is like 4 cost, right? Like goats, you can deploy multiple castles, and that's like very hard to deal with, right? Like in one well, I guess the other kind of threshold first is like getting to 8 is very important, and I think the one after that is getting to like 11 or 12 to be able to deploy the triple like 4s, right?
Okay.
And like one of my like future matches, I was able to deploy like 3 castles in a single turn, and my game plan was deploy all the castles, like play Be Prepared for like it was against like Ruby Sapphire, so he had like Maui and like Queen of Hearts to be able to kill one, but then you can just be prepared, and then now you still have like 6 ink left over. Then I just played a goat, and then bounce to go or ink a card, bounce to go, and then you can kind of set up that kind of sequencing again.
And now you didn't think for this deck that like the Super Goof would have been a good card to play?
So Super Goof's issue, I think, is that you need some certain conditions for it to work, right? Okay. Goat is like unconditional. Like no matter what, you're gonna get your 2 lore and you're gonna be happy about it.
Yeah.
A lot of the times you can gain like 6 lore with goat. That's why I think like getting to 14 is also another critical threshold. Because once you play like double goat and they don't deal with it, you can quest with both and then be prepared your own goats, and then you gain like 2, 2, and 2, 6.
Yeah.
Right? And that's like I won a couple of games doing that specifically. So getting to that 8, very important. Being able to play like double goats, castles, etc. Very strong. So yeah, I don't want to cut goat anymore. Very good. Castles. I think castles. When it first came out, I thought it was kind of a liability until I learned how to play it. So I think the problem is a lot of people are just like playing them, like just playing them randomly, and I think that's like incorrect. So I think the reason why this deck is a little bit more smooth is because of like the lower ink count or lower uninkables, right?
Okay.
And in higher uninkable counts, you have to sometimes ink a goat or a castle or some of the meta mim style cards, and it makes your like win condition a little bit worse. So I think one of the big trade-offs for me was taking out some of the uninkables, and in a way it's like you get to play more goats and more castles because you don't have to ink them.
Now, when's the ideal time to play castle?
Yeah, so I think the best time to play castle is if you can deploy 2 or 3 copies of them. So a lot of the deck is kind of just like, you're feeling out your opponent for like this first 7 turns. Right? And then starting from turn 8, you can start threatening like double castles or like double goats, things like that, right? But you can still actually feel out your opponent until like the 11th ink, right? A lot of the games, I'm literally just feeling out my opponent, just dealing with whatever they have, like applying some pressure. And then there will be one like kind of pivotal turn where you notice like maybe your opponent's like running out of juice or whatever, and then you can just, hit them with the triple castles or triple goats, things like that.
How many green steel matches did you play, if you don't mind me asking?
So I played 6 green steel, 1 in the finals, 1 in the top 64, and 3 yesterday.
And now, did you find that you still had a full hand, even with that you were able to make these decisions by waiting till turn 8 to play 2 castles?
Okay, against that matchup, I think it's a little bit different. Okay. I think the way you play against green steel with castle is first you make sure like, they don't have any creatures that can just straight up like challenge it. But you'll eventually get to the point where you get to be prepared, and then phase 2 of that matchup is being able to deploy characters and put them in the castle.
To gain your hand back.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So I think that's like the strategy against that. But against like Ruby Amethyst specifically, they have like Mauis and Foxes and stuff like that. So you can't just like play one and then like hope they don't kill it, because they have rush characters, right? Green Steel doesn't have any rush, so you're able to just deploy them kind of freely. And even if they have Zeus or Babu, they still have to like use some kind of resource to kill it. Yeah. So castle is very good. Triple castle is the play. And then Maui. At some point, I was also thinking about cutting Maui for Maleficent Dragon, and I actually did do that for one of the like online like theater tournaments, and I did okay. But I realized the problem was like, people are like deploying locations, and then like you have no way to kill them. And
Yeah.
also in the mirror, like this is able to kill a lot of like Medusa or like 4 attack characters and get like a 2-for-1 style trade with them. So yeah, I would definitely not cut Maui. And I think how you win a lot of the mirrors is you wait for them to kind of attack with one of these like, 4-cost, or not 4-cost, 4 strength characters like Goat or Medusa, or sometimes like when they quest with like Lady Tremaine, stuff like that, right? Like if you're able to get a valuable, like favorable trade with a Maui, usually that will like tilt the match in your favor. Yeah. So I think this is like the fun part of the deck.
Can't wait to see it.
So the fun part of the deck. So there's only 2 Medusas.
Wow.
I think most people go with like 3 Medusas just to be able to target like, Beast and Robin Hood and, Diablo, all that kind of stuff, right? And I would, but I would have to, increase the uninkable count. And I really didn't feel comfortable like cutting a Broom or a Maleficent. That's probably what I would have done. But I valued like the consistency of the deck more than the power of the card, if that makes sense.
So now, you're definitely dead set on playing 60 cards.
Yes.
Okay, because you want that consistency.
Mm-hmm.
And then now there's no thought of having the Lady Tremaine instead.
Okay, that's a good question. So in Chicago, I ran 3 Tremaine and 3 Medusa.
Ooh.
And I mean, obviously I had to like Sisus for this, so I had to like cut something somewhere. And I did like mention that, or like to some people, that like the Tremaines and the Be King Undisputed are definitely good cards.
Yeah.
And they are very important in the blue style matchups because they like to deploy like one huge guy, right? And like this deck actually like doesn't have that many ways to deal with like one big dude. The only way you can do it is like a Be Prepared, right? But I thought that, against blue decks, my strategy is to be just more aggressive. Okay. And then you don't have to rely on the Be King or the Tremaine to get you to the finish line. Because I think if they do deploy Automatoa with like a dime on board already, you're probably already dead. So I kind of shifted my mindset to like, okay, I'm just going to be very aggressive, lower the uninkables to be able to deploy the goats and the castles. Because the problem, I think, when you had like Tremaine, you actually had kind of like one less ink in your head to be able to like play the cards you want to play. Because sometimes you're like, oh, if I ink this card and, how am I going to even get to like 7 ink at some point, right? So I think definitely lowering the uninkables helped me a lot. And I never really had any brick hands, but you sacrifice some of that consistency for the power, right? So this deck is definitely a little bit lower in like power level, but it makes up for it by being able to be more consistent.
And now how many uninkables do you play?
So it's 12.
12.
So I know the standard is like the 16 with the 4 rabbits, definitely 4 Be Prepared, and then probably like 3 Medusa, and then I think most people are either 3 Tremaine, 2 Be King. I know in the French guy, he ran 2 Peter Pan in order to deal with the Diablos. I thought that card was a little bit too narrow for me, and I thought that a better answer would be the Big Sisu. Okay. So I decided not to run that card, and I mean, yeah, I guess it paid off for me, right? But,
it did.
Yeah. So definitely Medusa is the very strong. Like it's mostly there to kill like Beast and Robin Hood. Mostly Beast though. This deck doesn't have any really good ways to kill Beast, and like this is like the best one. Right? Yeah. Be Prepared. I think this one's interesting. I was actually also considering cutting one of these to add more Sisus, but I realized Be Prepared does something that like no other card in the game can do. Right, like literally, kill everything, right? And you can be in any horrible spot, like in the finals. I was in a horrible spot. He had like 5 characters. I had like no characters, and I was just able to rip a Be Prepared very timely, right? Okay. And then afterwards, he played like 2 small Ursulas, and then I played a Sisu, and then the game was just over, right? So Be Prepared is like definitely, I would say it's probably like one of the best cards in the game. Like it makes people play so like weird and funny that like I don't think you can cut it. Before today, I was like, oh, maybe I can do 3 and 3, but definitely 4 Be Prepared. It sets up like I described earlier with like the castles. Like in my Ruby Amethyst mirror, I had a hand of 4 Be Prepared and 3 castles. So I just played 3 castles, and anytime you played anything, Be Prepared. So that's like a good way to win the mirror, honestly, because like there's only so many like Maui's or whatever they have, right? They need to eventually deploy some characters to try to like challenge, and you can just.
So now, do you feel whoever plays Be Prepared first in the mirror match kind of loses, or did you not find that?
Oh, yeah. So that's actually true. If you play it first, you do lose. However, that doesn't mean it's a bad card, right? Because here's the sequence that usually like I run into. So you force one person to be prepared, and then as soon as that person be prepared, you can deploy double castles. And then they'll start deploying some characters, and then you be prepared on the back, like reactively.
Oh, but you still have the castles to gain you that passive lore.
Yes. So actually, if you cast it first, you lose. But if you cast it second, you would win. I think that's a better, like, that's kind of my mindset, right? If you get to cast it second, you win. So it's like, how do we get there to be able to force your opponent to be prepared? Yeah. And then the last card in the deck that I added, 2 Sisus. I would say this is like the MVP of the deck, besides Be Prepared. It's kind of like running 6 Be Prepared in the deck, especially against like the green decks, right? Mm-hmm. This is effectively 6 Be Prepared. That is also has the upside of not being able to get like taken away by Ursula. So yes. One of my games against Green Steel yesterday was that I think the general game plan for Green Steel is you save Ursula for turn 6 when I have 6 ink, and then you try to play as many copies as possible to take the Be Prepared, right? So I think he just basically deployed his whole hand, kept the Ursula for me, the turn after, right? And then what I did was I had a Sisu. I just shifted the Sisu and I just sang Be Prepared, right? And then I blew up everything. He was playing a little, like some weird tech with like Piglet and Cricky, which is like very high, like lore threatening cards that are extremely hard to remove, right? Like Sisus can't deal with like Piglet or Cricky or things like that. And he was like, okay, I'm just gonna win. Turn 6, I'm gonna dump his Be Prepared and I'm gonna send everything in, right? But I just like caught him off guard that one turn, and then the game was over, right? So you can kind of like get a earlier Be Prepared than people expect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to give any shout outs?
Shout outs. Well, I want to shout out Hung Soo, my friend. He came with me, and I remember I came in on Friday night, and he was like, oh, what should we run? And then I just gave him this list, and then he ran it exactly, and he also got top 16.
Congratulations!
So, he was very supportive of me for this this journey.
Awesome. It's great to have a great support system through these events.
And I think I also want to shout out George GG. He's one of my good friends, and we talk a lot of Ruby Amethyst, and like he thinks I go a little extreme, and then he's like, I'm just gonna take your deck and make it a little bit less extreme. Mm-hmm. And I would definitely I actually didn't run this deck through him. I kind of just like came up with it like kind of like the day of, because like in my mind I thought Sisu was a powerful card, so I wanted to run it. But like he's always been really good to bounce ideas off of, and I do appreciate it.
It's like your testing circle.
Exactly, and that's important. I think like it's hard to do to perform well on your own, honestly.
Especially when we don't have Pixelborn anymore. So.
Exactly. I think it's good to have a good support system, because like you're only as good as you are, right? And other people will help you bring you up.
Yep, exactly. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.